But we are very grateful for the success that HEICO has had. The number that we like to quote, I think that this gentleman maybe was getting to, is for every $100,000 invested in HEICO when we took over and in the very beginning of 1990 has become worth over $82 million today. So a lot of people have done very nicely, including a number of folks in this room. But the way that we did it, first of all, we had no idea that this was going to happen. And we had much more modest goals when we started down this path. And we really just wanted to build a good, solid industrial business. And I don't know if you want me to get into that now.
Please, go ahead, yeah.
A little bit later. So I was born in New York, and I'm 58, and when I was 3 years old, my parents moved to Miami, to what's now Pinecrest. So I basically have lived here, with the exception of college and business school, for 55 years, so as close to a native as they come. My wife was born at Mount Sinai, all of our kids were born at Mount Sinai on Miami Beach, so we're really very much a Florida family. Anyway, my parents moved down here in the late 60s. My dad was an accountant with Arthur Andersen, and then worked on Wall Street in New York, bringing companies public in the late 60s. And he had my mom's family was in the real estate business. They were prominent real estate developers. And although my dad didn't go into business with them, he was able to learn, a fair amount about the business, and ended up going into real estate. And pretty much on his own, along with his partner, over the next 10 years, became the largest condominium developer in the state of Florida. And as many people probably know, with the cycles that used to occur back then, people would do very well in real estate through the cycle, and then they'd tend to sort of go broke or give it back after the peak of the cycle. And my dad was, with a financial background, was determined not to do that, so he decided pretty much to get out at the top, and felt that without inflation and due to the overbuilding that had occurred in South Florida in the early 80s, that real estate didn't make as much sense. And with his financial background, decided to pivot to taking investments in publicly traded companies that were undervalued as interest rates were starting to go down. So at that time, Ronald Reagan had become president, and my brother and I were in high school. I went to Gulliver, just a few miles away from here. And we saw that while my dad's business was very interesting in this condominium conversion and development business, there was never anything that really remained beyond the financial gain. You build a building or convert a building and sell it out, and it was financially rewarding, but there was nothing that remained. And Reagan was president, talking about the revitalization of America. America can make it again, and how to fix the Rust Belt. And actually, Victor and I ultimately went to Columbia College in New York, which operationally was not run very well. So we sort of figured out, well, if this is sort of how American business is run, we want to go into industrial business and really help contribute. So that's what we did. And long story short, ended up, HEICO was a publicly traded company on the American Stock Exchange, had $25 million market cap. And then long story short, after a proxy fight and some ensuing litigation, we got control of the company at the very end of 1989. And we had hoped to go in one particular direction, but due to a series of events, that was not going to be possible. And we sort of then pivoted, and I can get into that in some of the future questions as to what we ultimately, what we went into. But suffice it to say, we became I guess I should mention it now. When my dad, my brother, and I came to the company, we were very fortunate that on one of the early days that we were there, a salesman came into the office, and we joke around that a lot of salesmen want to sell stuff that you don't have. You talk to them about selling all the stuff you have, and then they come back and say, well, what about, we've got A, B, and C, but I want to sell X, Y, and Z. And so that's what this sales guy did, but he was absolutely right. And he brought in a consultant. And we hired the consultant to analyze HEICO's capabilities and advise what we should do. And this gentleman was incredibly well respected, had a great experience in the industry at manufacturers and overhaulers and airlines, and he recommended that we compete with the original manufacturers developing more parts. And that was very difficult to do at the time because the FAA wouldn't grant approval based on re-engineering. And I'll never forget, he opens up his Code of Federal Regulations and he says, 21303C, and the FAA will grant approvals based on testing computations necessary to prove to the administrator that the part is the same in the fit, form, and function. And he said, in the past, companies tried to accomplish that this way, but I think we can do it doing it this way, a different way. And my dad looked at him and said, well, basically the company is no other option. It was really struggling at the time. And the consultant said, Eric, you're a halfway good salesman. You just need to go up to the FAA and figure out how to convince them to go do this. So I was 25 years old, and I got, was fairly hardworking and sort of figured it out. And with this consultant who I convinced to come on board as our chief operating officer, and he was 60 years old at the time. Wow. So I convinced him to stay until he was 70 when his wife made him retire. And then of course he remained as a close friend of the company and advisor to the company for the rest of his life. But he was the one who really came up with this idea to go to the airlines and offer them savings on parts where there were only monopolistic suppliers charging very high prices. So we were able to basically execute on that.